Everybody, welcome to the Rochester Real Estate Show. Jason Mancuso and Steve Popowych joins us today. Steve's a longtime member of the Anthony Butera team, rockstar agent, and we wanted to dive into today the topic of, I guess we define it as like rural areas.
Yeah.
Rural is a weird word. What's that?
Country homes,
Yeah.
right?
Which movie is it? Tommy Boy or Black Sheep? Road, Rule. Yeah, I mean, you're out in Kendall, right?
Yes. Yep.
Deep West.
Very deep west, yes.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I don't know, it's not that far out, right?
No, about 35 minutes. Yeah.
But you may as well be, feels like a different area compared to being Monroe County or at least, closer to the city in Monroe County, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we could get, Monroe County, you can get like Brockport, areas like that, Hilton, stuff where there's that country type of feel to it, right?
Absolutely.
Wanted to dive in today in terms of like, some of the differences with real estate, out in more rural areas in comparison to being more city center and the surrounding area, the suburbs surrounding the city.
Yeah.
So, talk to me. What should we know?
So, I mean, I think the biggest question I always get from people is, I want a house with land in the country, and then they look at listings and they say, well, there's a septic system, there's a well. Like, what does that entail? What does that mean? A lot of people get scared by it. They're used to having public connected services, and not being, not being on their own, pretty much, essentially, not dependent on, the grid.
Yeah, right.
So having these things
Off the grid,
sort of. You still have electric.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think that's the way to look at it. Ultimately, is like for most that haven't lived in country rural type settings, you're used to public connected sewer, you're used to public water.
Yep.
You hear well,
Yeah.
and that's scary. That's scary to me. I've never lived with well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like that, I may just go into this conversation or this thought with like, not for me, dude. Not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we can do today is kind of like myth buster to a degree of like here's what you should be concerned about and here's what you shouldn't worry about.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
again, I think we take it for granted to a degree of like you turn the faucet on and the water comes with no problem.
Yeah.
9.9999 times out of time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think this is a good topic to dive into in terms of like that type of myth busting with living in rural country, having the land type of thing.
Yeah.
So
So I mean, first thing is a well, right? Like your water. That's one of the things people probably freak out about the most.
I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Because
right?
and not to interrupt, but I think like septic is more common than not in comparison to well.
Absolutely.
Or even, we'll dive into like natural gas versus propane or oil or other sources, right? No, tell me about wells.
So wells, I mean, like, and people freak out because they're like, I got 3 kids. I'm a family of 5. Is, this well going to be able to sustain enough water for me to give my kids baths every night?
Yeah.
That's like, I mean,
it's a well run dry, right?
Exactly, right? Can I go out and wash my truck in the middle of summer? Maybe, it depends on the well, right? But like, the thing is that, they worry about all these things, which I totally understand, So we do things when we write a contract on a home that has, a well specifically, is we ask for a couple of things. We ask for a volume test, which tests the rate of water coming out of that well. It should produce 5 gallons a minute for an hour.
Okay.
That's the goal, right?
Okay.
And, then also we do potability test, which is, what is the water like? Does it have bacteria in it that are harmful? Does it have hard minerals? Does it, what is in this water that could potentially be a problem for you and your family, right? So
that's a standard contingency because we've talked a lot lately. The market's so competitive, and people waiving contingencies and such. Yeah. Are you seeing that with these types of properties where people are saying, "Hey, I'll take the well as is, don't worry about it"? I mean, I'm sure it's evolved to where it's happening more than like it's never happened before prior to this market, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you this. personally, I would never discourage anybody from waiving that well test.
Yeah.
I think it's a super important thing. Like, nobody wants to have a home where you can't do your laundry and you can't give your kids a bath, and you're paying somebody to bring you in water.
Sure.
It's not a fun situation,
Right.
you know? And outside of this crazy market hurts resale value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, like, you know, when we look at this stuff and we say, do we need this? I say absolutely.
Yeah.
You know? Are we seeing people waive the right to these things? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know?
Not recommended.
Not recommended.
Got
yeah.
it. Okay.
In previous market,
to know.
it was a standard thing. I mean,
Yeah,
you had a
it's like
well.
no questions asked. If you're a seller,
Always.
like I know I'm selling my house with a well, I'm going to have to get this
Yep.
checked. It's going to be part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a conversation I have with people who have wells and septic. You know, this is part of your closing cost expense is getting this stuff done. You know,
Or even like, and you tell me, but like do it right when you're listing, right? That way you could you show it to somebody, hey, this was just done a week ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. In this market, we can. I mean, you know, certain different types of financing want it done within a certain time frame
Right,
of
right.
offers. So in this market, yeah, if I know it's a good house, it's going to sell, it's going to have activity. Yes, do it right away.
Yeah.
Not a problem,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you know, before where houses were taking sometimes 80 days to sell, you know,
Yeah.
it's
That can be, yeah,
different story.
I get what you're saying. That
yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah. You
All
know?
right. So you're going to find out that the water is clean, healthy, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it.
Yep.
If it's not, if that test fails, what's the solution?
Yeah, there's all different kinds of things. I mean, one of the things that we look for when we're looking at homes with wells, when we go down into the basement area of the home, we look for holding tanks.
Okay.
That shows that it's a low producing well, and they're using that holding tank. And essentially what's happening is that well is kicking on, pumping water into that holding tank, and then there's a float valve on that well. When the well gets drier, it turns off. As the water fills back up, that well kicks back on and fills the tanks.
Got it.
So that's one thing that we always are looking for in
How big are
basements.
these tanks?
They're huge. I mean,
Yeah?
I've seen 100, 200, 300 gallon tanks.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
They're big tanks, and it just depends on how big of a space they have, number one, I think. And number two, how low producing the well is.
Would you have a holding tank if you didn't have a low volume well?
I don't see why there would be a need for it, really. I mean,
that'd be like a major luxury doomsday type of
yeah.
purchase. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I live on a well, right? I have a well. I have no holding tank in my house. I never have had a problem with running out of water in my house. I'm lucky. I have a good producing well,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people have that, and then a lot of people have holding tanks, you know? So
Right.
it's just, it tends to be if the well's not producing at 100%, we're seeing holding tanks.
But you see a holding tank in a house. You're looking at a house with a buyer. You see a holding tank. You kind of red flag mode potentially.
Not necessarily as much red flag as like, hey, if this is something you're exploring, let's have the conversation about it.
Right,
You know?
gotcha.
And let's talk about why this is here and the reason for it to be there. Like I said, to hold water for you when that well is, not producing at a rate that it
Okay.
should be. Other things we see are, media filtrations, water softeners, evidently for hard water. We see that on public connected homes too sometimes,
Sure,
though,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then we see UV light. UV light filtration, what that does is that kills the bacteria in the water.
Okay.
So if you have a bacteria in the water goes through this UV light, kills that bacteria, that makes it safe for you to consume the water.
Are there properties or are there stories, so to speak, of like, the water's just so bad, like the bacteria level, to where like, the house becomes inhabitable?
I haven't run into it yet,
Alright.
but I'll tell
Anything's
you.
possible,
Yeah.
but generally speaking, there's a solution to the problem.
There typically is, yeah.
Okay.
And, it really comes down to how much money is it going to cost to fix this problem, and are you willing to take on the maintenance too? Because something like a UV light is going to require you to, do regular maintenance on this to
Right.
make sure that it's working properly.
Right.
I mean, you don't want to get like E. coli in water, not maintenance your UV light. Next thing you know, your kids are drinking water and they're sick. So there's a lot of steps to it that really go into it. And it's a pretty in-depth conversation that we have in that basement space when we're looking at homes.
Sure.
I'm used to this. I see a lot of it. I've done a lot of homes with wells. I've done a lot of well tests. I got great contacts that really have, tons of knowledge.
Right.
And, usually if I can't answer a question for them, I can call, the professional and they can
Sure.
answer it.
Yeah. Good. All right. Stupid question maybe, but like the well runs dry. Like, is that super common of an issue on these types of properties?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
where it's like, okay, we just said pretty uncommon to where there's a problem that can't be solved bacteria-wise or, with the holding tank and proper volume coming in. But wells, like that's not a pun or whatever, or metaphor, right? Wells can run dry.
Absolutely.
Then what?
Then you got to pay somebody you either have to rent a holding tank or buy a holding tank, pay somebody to go fill water at a different location and either have it brought to you, or if you have a truck with the tank in the back, bring it in yourself. So the expense can get high. I mean, if you're paying somebody and you're renting a tank from somebody to, fill it, bring it in, have it sit in your front yard, during the dry months and like, let's say, July and August, there's an expense there,
But it's not as simple as go dig another well.
It can be. So they can drill for other wells, other spots on your property, depending on how much land you have, evidently, right?
All right, so here's the example. Like you got a few acres, like not 300, but, not even 30, but you got, say a 4 or 5 acre parcel, which, out in the country is common for kind of almost a smaller end of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
That size property and you got your well on one side, it's, if you're 100 feet over.
You could hit water.
You could hit it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, these wells, they can be 25 to 60 foot deep or deeper, you know? So, I mean, absolutely. You can hit water in one spot and not in another. Now, you can also have the problem where you drill, 5 times and you never find water on your property, and then you have a problem, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you're not the professional, so I won't hold you to a number, but ballpark estimates on some of this stuff as far as expenses.
I wouldn't even know where to be started right now with drilling. I haven't had anything done in a while.
Yeah, I get it.
And it can be crazy. Like I said, you can drill looking for water 4 or 5 times and not find it.
Yeah.
Or have just about the same water as you had before, water quality wise or water volume wise. So, it's one of those things, like it's really property dependent on how much money you're going to put into a well. I mean, that's why, it's so important that we do these tests initially just to make sure, because it can be very expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, ultimately, the worst case scenarios involved with well aren't so much that like you're likely to be out of water, period.
Yeah.
But more so that, and frankly, worst case scenario is sizable expense.
Yes.
But no matter what, you're dealing with extra expense no matter what in comparison to just being on public connected water.
Absolutely. And your time too, right? If you have a low producing well, maybe going to get that water or setting up time to have somebody bring you in water, right? I mean, expense, time, there can be stuff that's really involved.
Is it really like parcel to parcel, or is it generally known you get into like, this section of town, they got well issues, and it's just kind of a generally known thing?
It very much could be parcel to parcel. Absolutely. Like out where I live, my well, like I said, never gives me any issues. A half a mile down the road in the summertime, there's a guy with a holding tank in the back of a pickup truck, and I see it full sitting in his front yard all the time. Okay. So I know he's running out of water, right?
Okay.
Now, it can be very dependent. I mean, you have areas and you can have pockets where there's bad water, sulfury water, kind of gives that rotten egg smell.
Right.
A lot of properties along the lake, they had a lot of issues with that. So that's why they put a lot of public water in down by the lake to solve that problem.
Right.
But I mean, you can have pockets where there's good and bad.
There's no real science to it.
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stupid question.
Yeah.
Probably a really stupid question. I gotta ask.
Yeah.
Wells are like natural. It's not like
it's natural water.
200 years ago somebody was digging out well, underground or whatever.
No, it's natural. Right. And a lot of times they'll connect to like underground waterways or aquaforms underwater that hold large quantities of water. And that's the thing. I mean, that's why it makes it so dependent. I mean, you could have like an area that has a good water coming through, and then an area that doesn't. And this water's naturally filtered by the ground. So there's a lot of variables,
Right.
It can be hard. It can have sulfury smell. It can, all these different things.
And just the different terrain probably plays into it too,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We just covered a lot with well water. I got an education. I mean, just like anything, there's risk to it.
Yeah.
You scared me a little bit, but also like, if you do take the proper channels or process that, you can find out as much as you can to feel comfortable about it, to where it's, as long as you know the additional expense, like, you're good.
Yeah.
Like, I relate to it. I tell people, like, if you're getting a house with a pool,
Yeah.
right, you got to budget in. Like, you got to maintain the thing, right? You got to, if you're not opening and closing it yourself, you got to pay somebody to do it.
Yeah. Or the water expense even
Yeah,
to fill
the
it,
water,
right?
the extra, utilities, or if you're heating it,
Yeah.
chemicals, etc.
Yeah.
So, like, I tell people, I don't even know if this is conservative anymore, but, like, you get an extra $100 a month if you want to have a pool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So, well, it's kind of a similar conversation to
Absolutely.
that, in terms of, like, hey, you're going to have to maintain the systems involved with it. We can do as much as we can due diligence-wise to make sure that, we're confident the well's not going to run dry.
Absolutely.
Without unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah.
But from there, just budget in that extra expense.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And I tell people, don't freak out over a well, okay? I know it sounds scary. It can sound like, like, oh, man, this is really something that could be a problem. And as long as we do the proper tests and you have an agent that has knowledge in a well and they have a good contact with somebody who can, like, really go through all the stuff, you're going to be just fine.
But, yeah, don't freak out over it. But also, like, I think if you've had zero experience with it,
it's scary, right?
Yeah, and not necessarily freak out, but, like, definitely make sure you weigh what you're getting into, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because, I think, the last couple of years, post-COVID type of thing, like, there's a, like, our market's a little different, but there's a lot of, like, city slickers that are moving out to the country, right? Because they can work remote.
Yep.
And, it's like, what the hell is a well? What do you mean I don't just turn on the faucet type of thing, right?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
that could be something that leads to buyer's remorse if not properly discussed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did we miss anything there on that topic?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's next? We want to do septic,
Let's
sewer?
do septic,
or-
yeah.
Okay.
Septic,
All right. So generally speaking, suburban, non-rural areas, urban, suburban areas are going to be tied to public sewer.
Yeah.
Don't have to worry about the shitter being full, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk to me about septics. And again, I mentioned it before, you get suburban and you get more land, you get, less housing development type neighborhoods, then there's definitely a good chance you're on septic and not sewer.
Exactly.
So talk to me about septic.
So I think, like, the first thing you really need to know is, like, the basic, and this is a very basic idea of how a septic system works, right?
Okay.
Is there's, essentially a pipe that goes into the system, that what we call a solids tank, about typically 1,000 gallon, maybe a little bit bigger depending on the size of the house, tank that holds solids and fluid, right? That tank is essentially there to hold solids and let the fluid run off into what we call a distribution box. That distribution box has leach lines that go out and disperse that water throughout the yard. So, like, let's just say, you got a 3-bedroom house at 1,500 square foot. You're probably gonna have a 1,000-gallon solids tank. You're probably gonna have somewhere between 4 to 6 lines of leach line going out.
Okay.
All right. So
this is a filter type system.
it sort of like a filter. Yeah, what it does allow solids to fall and water to run off of that solids box into the distribution box out to the leach lines. That's why you see some homes that are on septic in the middle of summer when we've had no rain, they got a nice green patch going because it's constantly getting water from those leach lines. Right? So
Nasty water.
Nasty water. Nasty
Fertilizer.
water. Yeah, fertilizing. Yeah, you're going to be mowing that like really slow because your mower's going to be bogged down.
Cucumbers the size of your arm.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the important thing is to make sure you get this checked out, right? And, like, making sure it works properly. Because, I mean, you can have a $10,000 fix or you can have a $40,000 fix to fix a septic system.
40, like, total
Totally new.
Replacement,
Yeah.
brand new. Okay.
Yeah. And depending on size, evidently that price varies. Depending on the size of the home, how much, you need, how many leach lines you need, how big of a solids tank you need, all of that stuff, increases in price.
All right. I'm learning,
Yeah.
honestly. I used septic growing up, but, didn't think too much of it. It did, like, backed up a couple times.
Yeah.
So it's not fun.
Yeah,
But that can happen with sewer, too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
all right. You flush your toilet.
Yep.
Pipe outside the house.
Yep.
Distribution box first.
Nope. Solids box first.
Solids box first.
Yep.
Takes all the solid.
Yep.
Takes the fluid into the distribution box.
Correct.
And then to the leach lines.
Yes. To dissipate.
Into your yard.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So typically what we see most of the time is people have problems with their septic system, like you said, backing up, right? not doing the maintenance, not calling out your local septic guy to come out and do what we call pumping of that solids box. When that solids box fills,
Yeah.
right, then it gets to a point where it's plugging up the distribution box, right? Or what happens is you have a problem with this distribution box and it cannot accept water, which is causing your solids to get overfilled because the water's not dissipating off of it.
Right.
And now
So
it's
you
back
got
in your
a
house.
tank was set with solid and fluid.
Fluid.
And then,
Yep. And
Okay.
now it's back in your house. Not a good
What's
thing.
most common, the distribution box issues or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, your solids tank is made out of concrete, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
Distribution boxes are starting to go plastic now, and they've been kind of going plastic for the last, few years here, right? But we still are seeing a lot of them that are, 20 years old and they're concrete,
Okay.
The gases that are produced within this septic system, right?
Yeah.
Breaks down that concrete and makes it like crumbly, almost like
And
very brittle.
and a distribution box is smaller, more
Yes.
refined,
It's a
confined
smaller.
space, so
Yep.
it's going to break down.
Exactly.
You got increased risk of that breaking down in
Yeah.
comparison to your tank overall.
Exactly. And you have to remember, this is all underground, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like,
nothing's above ground.
nothing's above ground. It's all underground. So, like, essentially, you could be, your yard seems fine, everything's working good. The box is slowly deteriorating. The distribution box is slowly deteriorating. The weight of that ground pushing against it starts to have it collapse in, or tree roots get in there and they start plugging things up, breaking through the box, plugging things up. Now water can't flow the way it's designed to, and it's now not coming out of your solids, and now it's backing up into the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another stupid question.
Yeah.
Coming from a parent angle.
Yes.
Got a rainy spring day,
Yeah.
wet yard,
Yeah.
near the leach lines in the septic system.
Yeah. You're good.
Poop water?
No.
No?
No.
Far enough underground where
I mean, it's not super far underground, right?
Yeah.
But it is far enough underground, yes. And, the thing is, if your system's working properly, right, you shouldn't have those problems. We do what we call percolation tests around the area where they're thinking about putting in a septic system. It's essentially, think of a percolation test as a water absorption. There we go. Yeah. Test where they dig a small hole, they see how much water is absorbed in X amount of time, and that tells them if that ground is good for a septic system.
Okay.
You'll see mounds in people's yards sometimes, raised bed systems. That's called, because the water, the ground can't absorb the water, so they put sand in and stuff to make it filter through.
Well, now you got like pumps too, right? If it's raised generally to where
No, it's all gravity. I mean, it's all gravity.
But you kind of have pump.
Yeah, I mean, if you have like a bathroom in a basement space and it's below that septic line going out of the house,
But generally speaking, they want to make every septic system to where it's gravity fed.
they're pretty much all gravity fed. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless, like I said, unless you have like a bathroom space below that, the inlet.
Right.
to
No,
the
I
septic.
got you.
Yeah.
So, conservatively speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe there's two different questions to this. Like an old septic from whatever, prior built 1980.
Yeah.
How long is that going to last?
I mean, it varies. I've seen septic system distribution box put in 10 years ago and it's crumbling.
Yeah.
I've seen systems with 30-year-old boxes that are totally good.
But what about the tank itself?
The tank tends to not really be as big of an issue.
Okay.
I think they're a lot bigger, they're a lot thicker.
But I mean, are we talking 25 years, 50 years, 100 years?
It's you can't really put your hand on
Right,
an exact
yeah.
number. They can last. I mean, I've seen tanks that are old. Typically what happens is people drive heavy equipment across them, trucks, tractors, stuff like that. That breaks them usually.
Yeah.
That's why if you probably
Don't park on it.
don't park on it, don't drive on it. Like your lawnmower is okay, right?
Yeah.
But
Don't park your car.
Yeah, you don't want to take the dually out on there, and,
Right.
crush your septic system. You know what I mean?
When did septic systems come on the scene?
Oh, they've been around forever. I mean,
Okay. Just
my house.
Different,
Yeah.
different quality.
Yeah, absolutely. My house built in the late 1800s, right?
Right.
It's on a septic system. It's an old septic system. I don't know exactly how old it is, but it's old.
If you had to guess,
I would say probably early 1900 at some point that was done.
Really?
Yeah, it's old.
That old?
It's old. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It's probably at a minimum 60 to 70 years old. It's totally set up differently than what I'm talking about, the more traditional setup that we see more often than not,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there had to have been a time before this where just poop flew out your house and into the yard underground.
I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm sure there was a time when people were just digging big holes and
Right.
letting it kind of run. Now we don't do that because of environmental. You
Right.
know?
So probably somewhere around the 1900s, a guy named Johnny Septic invented this. Here we
This
are,
system, right? And here we are now. We're dissipating shit in water.
Yeah. Right. Well, and look at like alleviate my concerns there in terms of like you don't want your kids or your pets walking around pee water
Absolutely.
in the backyard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it works.
Yeah, get your scheduled maintenance done.
Sure.
Have your septic guy come out, pump it every 2 to 3 years. He's going to check everything over. He opens up that solids box, and he can tell by the levels that are in it if you're having problems with your distribution box.
Right.
He can
Yeah,
pump
because
it.
if he sees a bunch of water in it too, then there's probably an issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's just solid, then it's working.
Or if it's August and the area around your septic is like super saturated with water, and your leach lines are out here and you're closer to the house, you've got an issue, right? Now right?
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, it's
And we're tens and tens of thousands of dollars for a replacement.
Yeah.
Just a distribution box, which sounds like probably more common.
Yeah,
issues.
not as expensive.
Couple thousand.
$1,000 to $2,000 typically, as long as the lines are all good, right?
Yep.
It's when you start putting what we call a septic bed with lines and leach lines going out that it gets expensive, because they're replacing a lot of PVC piping, sometimes adding some sand to get the absorption rate there.
How often do issues with the leach lines?
I mean, you can have issues with them, especially if there's large trees around. I mean, that's really
Growing into them?
Yeah, the roots.
Yep.
The roots kill septic systems.
Right.
So
Makes sense.
if you buy a house and there's a large tree near your septic, cut it down, get rid of it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's a good. It's something people don't think about.
They don't.
And frankly, off topic, but like trees around foundations too.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like
yeah.
it's stuff you don't think about till it's too late, and then you're like, oh. Yeah, of course there's a tree there with its roots growing into my house or growing into my septic.
Yeah, 25 years ago when I put it in,
Right.
it was a nice
Great
little
idea,
tree,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now it's this giant,
No, it's monster.
giant thing.
Broke the podcast. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And again, more common, like, I don't know, if you're looking, outside of a certain radius to the city, like plan on septic.
Absolutely.
If you're not happy with that, then
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking in Kendall, there's no public sewer in Kendall.
yeah.
Everybody is septic.
Where's the cutoff like around here?
I mean, there's not really for say a cutoff because like Holly Village, they have
More village.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have the sewer system. And
yeah.
then once you get outside of the village, I'm sure it's septic, right?
Yep, septic. Yep, and then like Byron Burgeon, they have a septic system, but it's all maintained by the town. So it's like a giant septic system.
In the village?
In the village, Virgin, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of different, you see different things, different areas you go. Evidently, if you're on a backcountry road like I am, where, there's no real infrastructure around you, you're going to be on a septic system. And you might be lucky enough to have public water, but hard to say.
Hit or miss.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, real quick. Electric. Like, you're not going to be without electric.
No, you're good. Yeah, you're good. I mean,
modern times.
Yeah, I mean, they, these companies, they do a great job of making sure that, the electric lines get trimmed regularly. Like I can tell you, my house, the main electric lines run right behind it, right? And they've came through in the last 2 years twice to trim them back, make sure there's no tree branches on there, especially with all the wind and crazy storms we've had, right? I mean, like, the last thing you want is a tree to break, fall right on your electric lines. Now half the town's out of electric, right?
Exactly.
So they do a good job of making sure these things are trimmed and, there's nothing near them to try to, fall on them.
You know what I've never come across that you might have the answer to?
Yeah.
On our PCD, the property condition disclosure.
Yeah.
One of the questions is the electric, the poles, is public or private?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is there anything around here in this area where
Yeah.
there's private poles?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that would be in this conversation of
one
rules,
house
then?
I've sold. Yeah, one house, so not many, but one. Yeah, I did. They were pretty far off the road.
Yeah.
Needed a pole put up to bring in, utilities.
So there's going to be a pole every time at a main road.
Yes, and that's the public.
If you're 500 feet off the road, you got a long driveway or whatever, then you got to bring your own.
You're going to be responsible for that pole.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing with a pole. It's like, okay, you paid for the expense to have it put in, right? They maintain the wires on it, right?
Gotcha.
But
Yeah,
if
they
the
probably-
pole snaps,
No,
you're responsible.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. or if the pole doesn't pass the testing, because they come out and they test the poles. I don't know if you've ever seen them do it, but they put like a meter on electric poles.
Okay.
And it tests the inside of the pole to see how, density of pole. If that density is not there, then they mark that pole for replacement. The reason I know this is they did the one right in my
There you go. I was gonna say. I was wondering what the hell those
You
guys
get a
do.
random guy in your yard out by me, and you're like, who's this guy? You know what I mean?
You go out there with your gun?
No. The dog I had to keep in the house, But you go out there and you're like, hey, man, can I help you? I'm here testing the pole. So, they replaced the pole last summer, right by my house because it didn't meet the density levels that were required on the poles.
Anything like you get more outages in rural areas in comparison?
You do.
You
do?
do?
You do. Yeah, you do. I definitely get more outages, and I do see...
Just like not even weather related, or like if the wind's blowing, if there's an outage in Monroe County, chances are you're out if there's weather.
It typically tends to be wind, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because, a lot of open space, farm fields, open space gives that wind time to build up more speed, right? So that's when we get problems like breaking poles or tree branches on lines that rip them down. That's why it's so important they come out and do the maintenance more regularly on these, country areas than they do on, the major cities,
Got it.
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that happens.
And like you said, too, if pole goes down, it probably knocks out half the town.
Yeah, pole goes down, too, and you're on a well, you don't have a well anymore because there's a pump that pumps that water out of the well, and it runs on electric.
So now we're talking. Now we're getting deep.
So all you guys in the city that got public water, power's out, you can still, you can take a cold shower, you can flush the toilet. Me, I'm sitting there like, this sucks, man. I got to hook up my well pump to a generator to make it happen. Now, with that being said, we're seeing more and more whole home generator systems be put into homes out by me.
Yeah. And
these run on propane typically, or, I've never seen a fuel oil one, but propane typically is what they run on,
The whole home generator.
Whole home generator.
Right, gotcha, okay.
Yeah. And when I say whole home, doesn't necessarily mean like every light, every outlet, but
you're functioning.
You're functioning. They're going to make sure your furnace is on it. They're going to make sure your well pump is on it. They're going to make sure your fridge, your sub pump, all the stuff that like you would hook into your regular generator when the power goes out and you go, I don't want to flood. I want my food to stay good and I want to stay warm, right?
Yeah.
Like those are the things that are going to be hooked into it. They might, if they have the power available to, give you some outlets or run your stove.
Right.
They're going to, it
Don't
just
get
depends
these snot-nosed kids excited about playing Xbox while the power's out because you got a generator.
Depends.
Depends on the generator.
Depends on how much money you spend on the generator.
Exactly. I gotcha. Okay. All right. So a little segue there into heating.
Yeah.
Because natural gas in the country in rural areas isn't always a thing, or isn't a thing, period.
I mean, so like it's a thing sometimes, but not all the time, right? I mean, I've been on my house. I started off on fuel oil, transferred over to propane, so I'm familiar with both. Fuel oil's a great heat source. It gets your house from like 0 to 80 like the snap of a finger. I mean, it burns hot, right?
So let's clarify. I mean, you say fuel oil. There's an oil tank. The oil truck's got to come and fill her up.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. So like 275 gallon tank is what I had outside of my house. You call the oil company and say, hey, listen, I'm down to 20%. Can you come fill her up? They calculate how many gallons of oil that's going to be. You pay per gallon. They come, giant hose, guys out there, lugging it out there and stick it in the top of the tank and glug, glug, glug till she's full,
Yeah. So, and I mean, so my experience, we had a house in college that we rented that was on oil.
Yeah.
And idiot college kids, like, how come the heat's not on?
Exactly.
In the middle of winter.
Yes.
Oh, let's check the oil tank.
Yeah.
Oh, it's empty.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll be out there in 4 days. Great.
Yeah,
Good
exactly.
job, guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's things you can do. I mean, like, you can, some of these
would
furnaces,
imagine.
you can put diesel in and, that'll get you through if you run out. But the thing I always tell you live in the country. Check it. You know what I mean?
And
Like,
you live in the country. Don't be an idiot. College kid's not aware of your utility sources, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No. Yeah. College kids. Yeah. Absolutely. But fuel oil's great. It burns hot. Super dirty.
That's what I was gonna say. I've heard I wasn't aware of my surroundings in college, so I can't speak to whether this was the case or not. But I've heard a general film that kind of omits into your house through the register.
Not really as much into your house anymore.
Okay.
But into the actual furnace itself.
Gotcha.
Extremely dirty.
Yeah.
you can get a lot of problems if you let that furnace go. You can get like soot, essentially black soot coming out of your, out of your exhaust, and then you go outside in the snow. And you're like, what the heck? All this black stuff. You probably got a dirty, oil burner, and it needs regular maintenance, or the fuel to air ratios are off. It's burning too much, but it doesn't really emit as much into your house as much as it's just a lot of maintenance on the furnace itself.
Sure.
It's yearly. You have to do it, or you're going to have problems.
Right. Yeah, your gas furnace, you can kind of get away with neglecting it a little more, it sounds like. Okay.
Even propane.
Not that you should, but.
Not that you should,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Propane.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will tell you.
Yeah, sorry.
Fuel oil, when it does burn, it does have a little bit of a smell.
Okay.
It's not super pronounced, right? But if you've never had it before, you will smell it when that fuel oil first fires up.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Propane.
Propane.
Propane. It's great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's like natural gas.
Okay.
It's essentially the same furnace. They just change out a couple of small parts.
Okay. First, the oil source is going to be a totally different.
Totally
furnace,
different.
Right?
Yeah, with oil, you got this big giant burner thing. It looks like a giant motor sticking out of it. Where with propane, it's just like natural gas.
I would imagine oil, and maybe I'm wrong here, but you're not going to have a high efficient furnace with oil. Or they probably
I
have some level of it. It's not going to be the same as gas.
Yeah, I haven't seen one, right?
Okay.
I haven't seen a high efficient, PVC piping coming off of it like you do with propane and gas.
Yeah,
right?
I just picture a tank of a furnace. It's like,
pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
They're loud. They're loud, and they tend to be. They've come a long way. They're definitely smaller than they used to be, but they're definitely gonna be a little bit bigger than your propane or natural gas furnace.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So propane, it's a lot like natural gas. You still have tanks outside of your house. So you're still responsible for either being on a plan where they come once a month and fill you up, and they call it a budget pre-fill plan, or you can be on a plan where you're like, hey, listen, I got to go check my tank. When that tank hits a certain percentage, I'm calling for them to bring me propane. It really depends on the people and what they prefer, and they run your credit for if you're on autofill. So if you can do autofill.
Yeah.
But you're buying a house, you should be able to qualify for autofill, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Or if you just are somebody
that would be the way to go, though. Just you don't have to worry about it, or is it more expensive?
For me, I call because I look at it this way: in the summer months, nothing in my house runs on propane.
Sure.
My water heater's electric. My furnace runs on it. So really, come after March, that bill's totally eliminated.
But they're still coming out.
Nope.
If you were on the auto plan.
If I was on the auto plan,
they're still coming and they're going to give you a little top off.
Well, they're going to probably do that, but they're going to spread your bill out over a 12-month period, right?
Gotcha.
Where me, I just paid in 6 months, essentially.
So how long, you fill your tank up in October or whatever, September.
Yeah.
How long does it last?
Depends how warm you keep your house, how big your house is.
Yeah.
If you're like my girlfriend, you keep it at 72, you fill it once a month, So, it just depends, and she's going to see this, and she's going to be mad at me. But, sorry,
Keep her warm, would you, bro?
Listen, man, and our house is older, so it doesn't hold heat as well
Older
as a newer
house.
home.
Okay.
So,
But you can go through a tank once a month.
Oh, yeah.
If you're cranking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I budgeted about a $250 bill a month for me personally. Like I said, we keep it warm. We keep it super warm in there,
It's not, it's not way off, right? Especially you consider natural gas, older house, bigger house, and you're going to have a pretty big RG&E bill.
Yeah. And I have an 80% efficient furnace.
Sure.
Compared to, the more efficient furnace you have, the better the life of that propane is going to be,
Yeah.
I have, some of my friends, his dad has a high efficient furnace. He, fills his once every 2 months.
Gotcha.
So he's getting double what I'm getting.
Right.
He probably doesn't keep his house at 72 either, Sarah, but,
Subliminal message. Yeah. Nice. All right. Yeah. Missing anything on the heating conversation? Electric.
No,
could be a thing.
Yeah. I've seen electric furnaces.
More so if you're in a village with electric. Their own electric.
Yeah, typically.
Source, right?
Yeah. So Howley has their municipality has their own electric source. So it's significantly cheaper than if you're getting it like me, my natural grid. Or there's going to be it's going to be more, you know? So, yeah, I mean, you see those. They're not as common as you would think, but they're definitely still something that we see occasionally.
I know what I want to ask you. Propane tanks can be above or below ground,
Correct.
Right?
So
if
can
you want
fuel oil
the-
tanks.
If you want the aesthetic aspect of not having the tank,
Yep.
you can pull that off.
You can,
And then
yeah.
you can own them or lease them too, right?
Correct.
Is
Yeah.
there something more common there?
I lease my tanks
Yeah.
right from the company. You know, they bring them out to you essentially, quote unquote, free. I think
Yeah.
you're paying a little bit in
Sure.
your price per gallon,
Right,
right?
right.
But I mean, it's one of those things. Do you want to make the initial investment up front to own a tank and bury it and not have an ugly big white torpedo in your yard,
Right.
or do you want to, just
You're
kind of
okay
let it
with
sit
that,
there?
yeah.
Yeah, it just depends on you. You know, the good thing is if you don't own your tank, right, you're not responsible for maintenance on it. If the tank has an issue, you call the company, they come and replace, right? You own it,
You're
responsible now. Yeah.
Man, so with that said, how often are there issues with tanks?
I've never heard of it,
Yeah.
but I'm sure it's happened.
Right, sure. Yeah. But not, you lease your tank and there's an issue with your furnace, that's on you.
That's on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they'll check like the line set to make sure everything's good from like your furnace to the tank. You know, they'll check that to make sure there's no leaks or anything. And even to a certain point, that's your responsibility. I mean, they take care of the tanks and where those tanks hook up to the outside of your house.
Yeah.
When they're in, you're responsible.
Right,
If you
right.
got a leak and they got to, replace some gas line, it's going to be on you.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
What did we miss? What else? You can also step outside and shoot a deer during deer season, cook it up.
You can. You get peace and quiet.
Yeah.
You get to watch wildlife.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can hunt your land. That's probably the biggest. There's two things that I probably hear the most, and I want to hunt my land, or I want to be self-sustainable. And a lot of people are looking for land for like gardens or livestock or whatever. I mean, chickens, pigs, cows. Whatever they decide they want to do, some people are looking for that, and especially nowadays, right?
Sure.
To be more self-sustainable.
Yep.
And I mean, so that's pretty much what I hear from people is I wanna have a farm, I wanna have gardens, I wanna be able to hunt my property. Typically, it's the guys who are telling me they want to hunt their property. So I got to find them some awesome property and convince their wives that the house is good, right? So
There you go.
you
Yeah, but I think I mentioned it earlier. I mean, just with the trend since COVID of people moving out, from the city more so in other markets. It happens here. Don't get me wrong, but you just hear bigger metro areas across the country, and people are like, I don't have to go to work anymore into the office.
Yeah.
Let me get some land.
It's huge, right?
Yeah.
It's like, why do I need to be in the city? The commute doesn't matter.
Right.
If I'm permanently working from home.
Especially if you've been there your whole life or been there for a certain period of time and you're tired of the concrete jungle and you want your own real jungle.
Yeah.
So,
right?
cool.
I mean, lots of opportunity. I mean, lots of stuff for kids to do,
Sure.
Lots of stuff to keep you busy,
They don't have to play in pea dirt from the septic.
They do not. No. I mean, I wouldn't encourage them to dig in that area. But yes, but no, they do not have to.
Don't
I
put
mean,
the sandbox.
they can kick the soccer ball on the septic system and not
Gotcha.
hurt it, or have to be worried about getting contaminated.
Cool. I like it.
Yeah.
I feel like we got to have intro and outro music to this episode to Deliverance. Or dueling banjos.
I know that's what I'm going to see when I watch this.
Love it. All right, this was awesome. Honestly, I learned a lot here.
Yeah.
Because I've, like I said, I lived with septic when I was young, and I had oil in college, not paying attention, but it's a good, this is a great thing to dive into. Like if you're thinking of moving to the country, like this example we talked about, moving from the city to the country, want the land?
Yes.
This is a great crash course on what to expect.
Absolutely.
Because people just land, house,
Yeah.
cabin, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And not realize you gotta have water, you gotta have heat, you gotta,
Or the big thing is I want to build a house in the country.
Sure. Right.
Developing costs.
Yeah.
That's all tied in when you build in Wilder Estates.
Yep.
You build in there, right? In Hilton. It's all public connected everything. It's built into the cost of when you're paying for that home, Now the cost is tripled.
Yeah. Septic. Everything. Yeah.
Making sure it passes the percolation test to make sure it can absorb water, expense. Make septic system going in, expense.
Yep.
Maybe drilling more than one well,
Yep.
expense.
Sure.
So there's a lot to it,
Right.
that people just don't think about. And it's finding that right land that fits your needs
Again, I
support.
think I think this can be an enamoring type aspect of like, again, I want to live in the country.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is. Yeah.
I would bet, for every 10 people that have the dream or the ambition, like, I want to live in the country.
Yeah.
And they listen to this episode right now.
Yeah.
That, I don't know, a certain number of them are going to fall off. Be like,
Yeah.
I like my track with,
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
the sewer and the public water.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah. And, I think this is the thing is like, guys tend to be okay with it. The women, it really freaks out. It really
I'm
does.
going to stop you there before you go.
It freaks them out though because they're the ones that are like, oh my god, like what are we gonna do? I mean, and the guys are like, they're thinking about hunting
Right.
and riding the 4-wheeler.
Yeah, sure.
That kind of stuff. You know what I mean? The women are definitely more reeled in on what's going on.
As they should be.
As they should.
As we need them to be.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
There you go.
So,
Love it. All right, Steve Popowych joining us today. Rochester Real Estate Show here. Anthony Butera team at Keller Williams Realty. Thanks for checking us out, guys. Good job, man.